Hello, everybody. My name is Dani with Realistic Intentionality, and thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. Today is the first of many specials in which it is just me, just Dani, no guests today, because today I wanted to discuss something kind of important, which is realistic intentionality. What is it, what I'm doing, what kind of practices it is, and the complete guide that I wrote for anyone who's interested in practicing realistic intentionality. So we're here and we're doing it. And no further ado, let's dig in. So if you are familiar with my podcast, if this is not the first episode, you know that I usually start every episode with some positive words to my guest, and I always end the episode with positive words to them again and positive words to you. That is because I aim to empower people. I aim to allow people to see their own potential and to find their success through their own means. And really, that comes from so many different things. Like I do it out of love, I do it out of admiration, I do it out of respect, I do it out of a place of acceptance and non-judgment that I try to stay at in most times. So I'll get into a little bit about myself in case you don't know. My name is Danielle, but you can call me Dani. And I am a multifaceted artist. I do painting, I do writing, I do poetry, I obviously do content creation, and I do interior design. I am an aesthetic person. I like to do aesthetic things. I love fashion and expression, and really, if it's artistic, I probably like it. My entire life, I've always considered myself an artist. I always wanted to be an artist in multiple different forms. But I also always had a sense of wonder and partially fear of existence and philosophy and like spirituality, of like, why are we here? The big questions. I remember being, as early as maybe like 5, laying in my bed wondering why I was there. And I think that's a universal experience, right? Or we all were born into these bodies and had to get used to existing and had to understand that as children. But for me, it was so poignant and strong that I always wanted answers. My family was not particularly religious. My mom was like kind of spiritual, but she didn't really do any spiritual practices. She just considered herself spiritual. She liked she liked the subject matter of spirituality. My dad is definitely more science-based, not really into any faith. My grandparents were all Christian. And by the time I was the third kid, so by the time I came around, like they did do the whole church thing, with my oldest brother and kind of my older brother. But by the time I was around, they had given up. So I was raised without really any particular faith. I was told there was a heaven and, it was whatever. I didn't necessarily subscribe to that, but I liked the idea of it. I always believed in reincarnation and karma. It just kind of naturally felt what made sense to me. And so I kind of like leaned into that subconsciously and always felt like, yeah, like I will be reborn into other lives. It was whatever. And, that was the kind of stuff that my mom also kind of like toyed with. So it didn't seem like, to me, I didn't think of that as like a Hindu or Eastern type philosophy. I thought of that as just like, oh, like that's just a thing that people can believe in also. Like you can believe in heaven and believe in reincarnation. And I always had that very spectral, wide view of things. I never was very radical. I was never like, it's gotta be this or that. It was always like there's a lot of gray area, and I kind of just existed in that. Growing up, I definitely was undiagnosed autistic, and I struggled a lot. My family was not the most functional. I had, my parents had marital issues, and my older brother had behavioral issues, and I was really close to, my other older brother, the middle child. But as he started growing up, he didn't want to play with me anymore because I was younger. And I also had a hard time making friends, partially because of being autistic and also partially my dysfunctional household. I didn't know how to, have relationships. And also I would sometimes have friends over and the household would be dysfunctional and kind of scare them away. So I grew up in kind of like this isolation of feeling like I wanted to believe in something and really contemplating all these things and not really fitting in and being a creative person. But I was not necessarily taught self-discipline or, any kind of regulatory things. So I would start creative projects and I would kind of give up on them. I didn't really excel in school, but I didn't do too badly either. I did excel in writing, but I never necessarily wanted to be a writer. So it's just like, whatever. I just felt like I was good at it. And by the time I was a teenager, I was definitely like seeking. I was seeking validation. I was seeking love. My family at that point had completely disintegrated, and I did not really receive the affection that I definitely needed. And so and I was so like compelled to not be a virgin. Like, I don't know what it is, but I can remember even being in elementary school, I was like, I just want to have sex. I want to have a partner. I want to do freaky shit. I was like, I want to have threesomes, whatever. And like, I don't even know where those concepts came from. But by the time I was a teenager, I was like, I am ready to date. I am ready to do things. I want to live a life. I want to explore things. I was very, that pondering of existence, it definitely made me very like adventurous and made me kind of like a risk taker by the time I was a teenager, because I wanted those answers. And I did not really feel safe to get those answers in a way that seemed authentic within like my family. And I wasn't too close with anyone at that point still, like as friendships. So I did. As a teenager, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I am just going to start dating and start being rambunctious and getting into trouble. And I did. At that point, I definitely kind of, I toyed with being an atheist, and even though it was like a very uneducated atheist. Like I said, I was an atheist, but I definitely believed in like reincarnation and karma. I toyed with a few different like labels, just like trying to be edgy as like a teenager. Like I was like, oh, I'm an atheistic Satanist, because that's what Murdoch Nichols' character from like Gorillaz was. And like I wasn't actually. Yeah, I didn't actually. And I just like, I kind of surrendered on not finding meaning, and then I dove into like romantic relationships and having a very like big compulsion to that, because generationally in my family, women have been overly attached, overly dependent, and overly like compulsive with men generationally. So I witnessed that behavior and I mimicked it, as most children unfortunately do before they hit a point of self-awareness on it. And I got into trouble that way. I started having sex at a young age. I was getting into trouble. By the time I hit high school, like freshman year, I was already smoking, already drinking a little bit, smoking cigarettes, having sex, and not really questioning anything at that point. I kind of just was chasing pleasure. I was chasing fulfillment through sensory pleasures, and I still had no self-discipline, even though I was doing arts and I had a lot of potential. Like I did Skills USA and like DECA, and I had like a blazer and an emblem, and I went to vocational school and I did internships. I had a lot of a potential, and even though I wasn't necessarily academically excelling, I had a lot of extracurriculars through my vocational school that did put me decently ahead. But it never felt like what I was meant to do. Like how some kids are very like academically inclined and disciplined, or even as adults, people are very like career oriented. I never really felt that way. Like I was just doing it to do it, and I knew that I was decent at it. I was doing graphic design, but I truly was just chasing pleasures. I just wanted to go out with my friends. I wanted to go out with my boyfriend. I just wanted to have fun, whatever. Okay. And I also was not particularly good at maintaining friendships and relationships at this point, because I went from not really having too many close friends in elementary school. I had a few, but I couldn't maintain them, to meeting my friend group that I have to this day, in middle school. But I was also like dating, and we were all just growing up. I would, talk shit on them, and like we'd joke around, we'd get into fights. It was very kind of like, it was just typical teenager shit. Like, who knows what we were doing. Halfway through high school, I started smoking pot even more and linking up with like my lifelong friends. Like, they are still my friends to this day. But I got into some trouble. I got on probation. I became dependent on using weed and smoking and drinking. I was still like kind of compulsively dating, but I had kind of gotten out of that. But I had fallen like truly in love. Like, I had the relationships and I said I loved them, but I had truly fallen in love by the time I was, a senior in high school. And that relationship quickly fell apart around graduation and after, because a lot of things had happened. We were on probation. I had gotten pregnant in high school, and I was pretty firm-handedly pushed to terminate the pregnancy, which was a very formative experience for me. Going through the loss of a pregnancy that, a lot of people are like, oh, if you have an abortion, you're going to hell. You have an abortion, you're a murderer, or you sin or whatever. But being a teenager and really not given a choice, and like knowing that I wasn't going to give it a good life, but also like not really having a choice, but then having to go through it, and being in love with the father and not going through that, it was a very formative experience. I got really into drugs and alcohol after graduation, trying to cope with that relationship falling apart, my still lack of ability to maintain relationships or friendships, my undiagnosed autism, my lack of meaning, and suffering through the loss of that pregnancy, and even just like the loss of like my last year of being high school, being on probation, and I wasn't allowed to do much. And so I just got really into drugs and alcohol, and I was using a lot of cocaine and Percocets, and I was smoking and drinking on top of that. And I was so depressed, and I was so ready to end it all. I didn't want to exist anymore. And so I was ready to. I had all the pills and I was on the floor crying, ready to die. And I managed not to. My roommates caught me and they got me to a point that I could cope. And in the moments of coping and knowing that I needed to rebuild my life, I found spirituality. And I found out about like the Eastern philosophies and like chakras and, you know, the esoterics of the multidimensional things. And I learned everything from the branches of yoga and yogic practices to, you know, the crazy like metaphysical things of like healing crystals and transcendental meditation. And I got so into that, like full on awakening, full on like activating all these things in my body, that it doesn't matter if you believe in that or not. I firmly believe that every person creates their own reality, because everything is just spectrums of light, and we are the ones to decode it and project it outward. And so I do believe everyone has their own unique experiential reality. And so for me, I do align with some, not all, some spiritual principles. And because that is my truth, because that is how I currently live and that's how I align naturally, you know, I got really into that and I really found meaning and purpose through that. And a huge core teaching is to act and live from love and to be a good person and to work on these things and to, you know, try to improve yourself for the sake of betterment of the world and for your own bliss and meaning. And so I did that. I went from, you know, not really having meaning and chasing pleasures and not really knowing what I was doing in my life because I got so caught up in heartbreak and drugs and alcohol, to now refining myself. I stopped using drugs. I eventually stopped drinking alcohol a little later on. I started meditating. I started eating healthier. I started, you know, trying to treat people better, trying to be more in tune with my emotions, trying to be more aligned with a purpose. And it did me well. You know, I was able to have friendships and relationships. I ended up moving to Florida out of my home state from Pennsylvania. And I met my life partner. We had a child. You know, from the age of like, I had my spiritual awakening at 19, and then I had my son at 22. Those years were like rapid growth. I'm an adult now. I know that I need to be a healthy person. I need to self-improve. And I did it, you know. I managed to clean up my act. I mean, I still drank and smoked weed right up until the pregnancy. And then I you know, have been pretty much sober since then. And I do have to like acknowledge, I had a near-death experience in high school, which was extremely profound. And I couldn't even begin to unpack what had actually truly happened during that near-death experience until I confronted spirituality. But I did. I had a near-death experience. I saw a fractal tunnel. I saw the white light at the end. The white light got to me. I left my body. I shot up into the sky. I love how I'm like casually, this is like a kind of a big thing. And I'm just like casually adding it as like a footnote. But I did. I left my body. And I remember having the conscious thought of like, shit, I just died. Except the wording I said was, I just ruined my life, was what I had consciously thought after I left my body and was shooting up to the white light. But, you know, it was more translated as like I just died. I had that profound experience. And I also, throughout my high school years and my early adulthood, I also used a lot of psychedelics, from LSD to a small amount of mushrooms, not that much actually, which is surprising. Because I think if I were to like get back into psychedelics, I probably would do like psilocybin. But I truly actually don't have that much experience with psilocybin. And I did ayahuasca and I did some research chemicals. All of those psychedelics and the near-death experience did prime me for the spiritual context because, there's a huge overlap between the psychedelic community and the spiritual community. I was able to use kind of my experiences on psychedelics and then the knowledge of all the spiritual work that I was doing to really create all of that change very quickly and with ease. I felt empowered. After becoming a mother and that profound shift, I realized I wanted to make something of myself. I wanted to create and I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I wanted to do things for my son, mostly in content creation. So we started a YouTube, which did not last very long. I did some content creation. I worked on a film. I did content creation for other people. And we lived at a Hindu ashram, which an ashram it was like a Hindu temple that a guru had lived at and a guru had founded. So I had lived at a yoga mission, a Hindu ashram for 5 years while raising, my son and having this partnership. And so it was like the life that I had wanted, because when I first found spirituality, I was like, oh, I want to have a family, raise the family and, raise my children spiritually. And I want to live on like a spiritual community, very commune living, very stereotypical. But I did it, got clean, moved to Florida, started a family, moved to the ashram, and was doing all these creative projects. And I was studying Hinduism, but throughout those 5 years, I suffered a severe, spiritual crisis. Mostly because I think I was trying too hard to fit myself into the Hindu side of things. And I personally, for me, and again, to each their own, but for me personally, I do better without organized, strict guidelines. I do like yoga. I like the branches of yoga. I think they're really good stepping stones, and I think they're like good markers to use. But I myself am a little more fluid. I'm a little more flexible. I just truly think I create my own reality the way that fits with my particular being, and it doesn't necessarily fit into a mold that has been established. Hi, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for listening and watching this special. There is no sponsor for this as it is a solo special, but I did want to add an editor's note that for the next 5 minutes, the audio quality does go down quite a bit. There was some sort of technical issue with my audio program. However, I promise you it gets back to its regular high quality after 5 minutes. So if you can just bear with me for the next 5 minutes and you will be back to a high quality audio podcast. So thank you so much for listening and enjoy. Through that suffering and also struggling with the relationship and the partnership because, he had addictions and he's human and he's working on himself too. Through trying to navigate adulthood and parenthood and that relationship because, being mindful of the fact that I didn't truly start living a healthy, active life until 19. And I had my son at 22. And at that point, of when I really started to struggle and lose my sense of spirituality and my sense of peace, that was 5 years I had rehauled my life and completely created a whole new thing and tried to teach myself everything to have a functional, healthy life and try to do all the healing, all smushed into 5 years. I just became a nervous wreck. I felt so anxious and I didn't feel safe in my life. I lost the trust in the universe that I had all those years. Because, my partner had a medical event that was caused by his overuse of a certain substance. And it was really scary. And I am very good in emergency situations, luckily, but that experience just really made me lose any kind of comfort and safety in my life. And then also, trying to live at a Hindu ashram and live by those structures when that was not necessarily aligned with myself, and the natural struggles of being a parent. And at that point, my son was 4 and 5. So that's 4 and 5 years of complete self-sacrifice. I will always talk about how heavy the weight of being a parent is. I will never shy away from that. It is excruciating pressure, excruciating responsibility. Yes, the love is wonderful, but it is not all rainbows and sunshine. In fact, it's more often than not just excruciating self-sacrifice. And so that occurring for 4 or 5 years straight, on top of these other things, I did not want to exist anymore. I felt just anxious and depressed, and I, was still undiagnosed. I am still technically undiagnosed to this day. And luckily, we did move to a state with better healthcare, and I'm trying to work on nailing down a formal diagnosis for me and my neurodivergence. I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I felt really scared. My brother suffered from mental illness, and I was really scared I was falling in that same suit, and I would not be able to take care of my son. And, that is my top priority, is being a mother and being able to raise my son. And so to feel like I was losing my mind and I wouldn't be able to raise him or keep him safe was horrifying. I had to rebuild myself from the point of not being able to leave my house, barely being able to get out of the bed, having chronic panic attacks at any moment, fearing every intrusive thought was going to become a reality, fearing I was going to black out and harm someone, God forbid my son, or myself. I was terrified at every moment, and it was incredibly dark. Aside from when I was 19 and I was ready to take my life, this was the darkest point. In fact, darker, because I had so much to lose. And through mindfulness, I managed to pull myself out. I truly just, they tried to prescribe me Prozac, and I just wasn't comfortable with that, because a big fear of mine was how I would react to certain medications. To my own understanding, I realized I have obsessive compulsive thinking. I'm not going to say obsessive compulsive disorder, because I'm not going to self-diagnose that, and I also don't like the idea of labeling yourself a disorder for the rest of your life. For me personally, to each their own. Again, whatever helps you exist works for you. But for me, I did not like that, so I just call it obsessive compulsive thinking and obsessive compulsive tendencies. So I, was obsessively, compulsively feeling that I was going to die and obsessively thinking about it, which caused the anxiety. And really, I recognize now that even with my obsessive compulsion towards sex and relationships, overthinking things as a kid, I always was a very obsessive thinker and compulsive thinker. I truly used that to try to benefit me. So I was like, I'm going to be obsessively thinking about how I'm going to do better. I'm going to be obsessively thinking about how I'm mindful in the moment and I have control over what I can do, because the intrusive thoughts were such a big fear for me. I was like, I am in charge of myself. I'm in charge of my life. I know what I want to do with my life. I know I want to be successful. I know I want to create content. I know I want to be a stay-at-home mother who homeschools and helps my son have the best life he can. I want to have fulfilling relationships. I want to have a fulfilling self-love. I want to have fulfilling romance and excitement and adventure. I want to be intelligent. I want to be bilingual. I want to travel. I want to do all of these things and be so wildly successful. And I cannot do that from my bed having a panic attack. That is it. So I'm going to compulsively decide to change my life right now with the intention of becoming who I want to be right now. So I literally was starting at zero of constant panic attacks and not being able to leave my house for almost a year, to being determined to have the confidence to live the life that I knew I existed for. And so every day I just mindfully did exposure therapy, where I started going out of the house again. When I would have panic attacks, I would feel them. I would pray over them. I would do exercises for them. I would accept that I was not my anxiety, that my anxiety was just a side effect of my compulsive thinking that got hijacked by the fear of a traumatic event, and that I just need to work on my programming, and in time it will be better. And it did. Through the exposure therapy, through reminding myself that I can retrain my neural pathways and I can retrain all the chemicals and the cortisol that were getting released, I had that intention to shift my entire mental programming that had went haywire over the course of years, ending in that point of just severe chronic anxiety, to functioning. And almost, I had gone to a point where I maybe had, a wave of anxiety twice a month. So I went from chronically being anxious in every given moment that my intrusive thoughts would win and that I would harm myself or others every single second of every single moment of every single day. I went from that to not having even an anxiety attack and only having a wave of anxiety once or twice a month with no medication, no formal therapy, because I could not access affordable therapy down in Florida. I did that all by being mindful and having the intention. And so I realized how powerful my own mind could be. Even in the deepest depths of a dark night of the soul, I cannot properly express how dark of a place I was in. If you don't have anxiety, you may not understand what a big deal that is, to go from that polar extreme to the opposite side. But it truly saved my life. It was the accumulation of all that I had learned through healing my life and spirituality and mindfulness and Hinduism and the esoteric stuff and all of the self-work and self-improvement and all the courses I did. They all worked together as a synergy to help me become mindful and to produce the life that I wanted. I recognized that it was meant for me, the path that I picked to treat, my anxiety and my obsessive compulsive thinking and my lack of spiritual faith. Truly, I was in, the dark for a lot of different reasons, and I figured out the path that worked for me, and I did it every single day. And it, wasn't easy at first, but it got momentum, and then soon I noticed more and more days going by that I wasn't suffering. And I even had a friend at the ashram, and he also was going through his own healing journey. We had a conversation, and I told him about how I had completely worked through my whole chronic anxiety through the mindfulness and the mindful intention, and he saw value in that. I realized perhaps that this is something that should be talked about a little more. I should verbalize it, because to me it was all a mental process. I was just I just have to get out of my own head and do all these things. And so to me it was just a mental process. But upon talking to him about it, I realized okay, this is something that I should verbalize. So I healed and I got better and I was able to function again. And we were pretty much me and my partner were pretty much at the point where we knew we needed to change where we were living, what we were doing, because things were just not aligning anymore, and which also contributed to all of my issues those years. So we decided to move to Pennsylvania. Back to Pennsylvania for me. Big jump for him though. And try to start a life here. And I had gotten podcast equipment throughout this time for him, funny enough, but he never really jumped on making a podcast. And I was like, you know what? I think I'll make a podcast when we move to Pennsylvania, because I have all my old friends and family in Pennsylvania. I have more of a diverse pool of people to try to get on the pod. So I should just go ahead and do the podcast. And so we moved up here. We got settled. We worked on our house. We worked on, settling in. He found a job. And moving back, I had also reopened tons of old childhood trauma that I had not realized also was contributing to my mental issues, internal beliefs, how I was raised and how it wasn't ideal, and how my brothers and other family members, how they kind of turned out, and really getting over a lot of resentment and struggle through the understanding of the more level-headed view of my childhood. I've been applying, trying to have that mindful thinking and have that intentional thinking of, I want to live my life the way I meant to. So I knew I wanted to eventually, I really would like to move to Central America at some point in my life. And I also just want to travel. And so I decided to start learning Spanish. And I started eating healthier again. I started jogging, which I haven't done kind of recently because it's been so snowy. But I, started reconnecting with my friends. I went through kind of a big shift. I had, through all this healing and stuff, I also was faced with the reality that I had been in Florida for how many years, and what relationships are meant to stick and what relationships weren't, and kind of coming back to my old life with new perspective. And through a heartbreak of someone who I had known, back when I was a kid, and realizing how that relationship has shifted once I moved back, that heartache was so immense. And I still, I just wrote blog posts about it. I still feel it very strongly, that I decided to use my pain and use my struggle and try to make a podcast and make a platform and actually do the thing that I had thought about doing. So I decided to just do the thing. So on December 10th, I tried to make a website and failed miserably. On December 11th, I set up with Blogger. I set up realisticintentionality.blogspot.com. The following day, December 12th, I wrote blog posts, and I got realistic intentionality on every platform, and I began making content with the intention to launch in January. I decided to make my platform about the mindful, intentional healing and empowerment that I had went through to heal my anxiety and to bring my life back to its purpose and to bring myself from suffering. And I decided to let my platform be a vehicle for that practice, which I coined as Realistic Intentionality, which was truly one of the first ideas of a name. It was really the one that seemed available and seemed to explain what I'm trying to do here, right? Because it is intentional living and it is mindfulness, but it is realistic in that it is geared towards the individual. My healing, I couldn't just do the branches of yoga or the Hindu or the esoteric or the spiritual ways to heal myself. I had to find a hybrid of all these different things with an understanding of my own compulsive thinking and an understanding of my circumstances. And I had to make it all curated to myself of my intentional living and my mindfulness. I just started making the content, and I immediately felt so fulfilled. And I remember the night that I had first uploaded to Spotify, the first podcast, I had bawled my eyes out. Oh my God. Because to me, I was like, okay, trying to figure out how to have a guest on the podcast and, get it edited and get it on YouTube and Spotify. I was like, that is going to be like the biggest hurdle. And I did it. I had a guest who I had never met before, Trish. She sat down on the couch. I had not met her, and I was able to hold an hour and a half. It was actually more than an hour and a half. It was about an hour and 45 minutes. And I had to edit it down. But I had done that with a stranger, and it turned out good. And I uploaded it, and it uploaded successfully. And I just cried because I realized all of the years of content creation, the years of graphic design, the years of trying to learn how to have relationships and conversations and healing and introspection and mindfulness and awareness, all of it came together in that moment to back me up to create this platform to help people empower and save their lives the way it saved mine. And I'm like tearing up right now. I just had to show up. At that moment, I realized I had all the tools necessary. I had all the equipment. I had all the understanding. I had all the accounts. I had the resources. I had the faith. I had the self-worth. And all I needed to do was show up and just do it. And do it consistently. And here I am on week 7, recording a solo pod and talking to you, whoever's listening, about my journey and my whole life, basically, what led me here. I want to help people. I want to help myself. I do want to make an income. I do want to have a successful life where I can travel and I can show my son that you can make a living doing something that's beneficial for the world. I do. I sue me for wanting to have some financial livelihood. But truly, I want to help people. There are a million ways I could make money that doesn't help anyone. But instead, I want to give people access to this knowledge that saved my life. I want people to know that they are worthy of saving their own life. They are worthy of becoming empowered and making the decisions that's going to give them the life that they want. I don't want anyone to feel the way I have felt in my own life so many times. I have felt so unworthy of love, unworthy of having a family, unworthy of having a career, unworthy of having money, unworthy of people listening to me, unworthy of people looking at me. I have felt so alone and so isolated and so scared and so done with existing. And I don't want anyone to feel the way that I have felt. And so if somehow me saying these words into a microphone and me having these conversations every week with these people and me typing out my blog posts and making silly TikToks, if somehow that can even help one person not feel the way I have felt, I will know I've done good, What I'm offering in my content is for everybody. It's not meant to be gatekept or paywalled or marketed towards a certain type of person who does the intentional living vlogs and stuff. This is meant for everyone. Anyone that wants to have the life that they dreamed of. This is for you. It doesn't matter what you believe in. It doesn't matter your background, whether you're an atheist or a Christian or a Hindu or none of the above, whether you're a man or a woman or a teenager from a rich family or someone stuck in foster care, you deserve to have the life you were born for. You were born with such a unique outlook, and you were born with this beauty inside of you that you can feel every day. Even if you don't act on it, you can feel it pulling you, and you deserve to follow those pullings and do a pursuit of passion to get the life that you want. I'm like a snotty crying mess right now, and I apologize because nothing's grosser than seeing a bunch of snot and tears on camera, but I'm just going to roll with it. They are tears of purpose, of me knowing that I want to help people. And if you're listening to this, you know, my analytics are still very small and abysmal. So I only get a few listens per podcast as of right now. So if you're listening to this, you matter. You matter to me immensely. And you are meant to hear this message. You are meant to do something with yourself. You're supporting a small-time creator right now and listening to her cry and snot about how a mindful practice has changed her life. You are meant to do something incredible yourself. Truly. It's easy for people to pay attention to the influencers and content creators that have millions of views. But if you're listening to this little podcast that just launched a few weeks ago, that only has 7 episodes and abysmal analytics, you are special. You're capable of supporting people. And you deserve a life where you are supported also. So I literally had my iPad unlocked and open this entire time because I did write a complete guide on how to, you know, have realistic intentionality be a practice for you. So it is an 18-page guide, and it's a PDF, or you can just read it on a page on my blog. If you go to realisticintentionality.blogspot.com, at the top, underneath our logo, it says the complete guide. There's a couple different sections of the guide. So there is some definitions of mindfulness, what mindfulness and what intention are, and what intentional living is. And the table of contents right below it, there's what is realistic intentionality. There's why begin this practice, understanding your worth, tapping into awareness of control, addressing your strengths and weaknesses, considering your dream life, establishing the goals of your journey, realistically arranging your everyday, mindful exercises to keep you motivated, and things to consider. I'll give you just like a quick summary of each of these sections. What is realistic intentionality? That's pretty obvious, I would say. I just get into, you know, how this practice is kind of built on mindfulness with intention. You're being mindful in the moment with the intention of getting the life that you want, whatever that life looks like for you. Why begin this practice? It talks about how you deserve to live the life that you exist for. You deserve to be happy, and you know, why not? You're gonna die. You might as well at least try to have the life you want. Understanding your worth is all just about reaffirming that you are worthy and you are deserving of having your dream life. It doesn't matter what you've done or what you're going through. As long as you're not trying to harm anyone, you're worthy. So understand that, because you will not allow yourself to succeed and be happy if you don't think you're worth being successful and happy. Tapping into awareness of control, that is all about using your mindfulness, tap into the moment and realize that you are in control of what you do next. You are in control of your emotions and how you react to them. You're in control of what decisions you make. It's really just like once you are in a mindful moment, you're realizing you exist and you're thinking of what you want to do and what your intentions are, tapping into the control. Okay, I'm going to do this because this aligns with my intentions. Addressing your strengths and weaknesses. This is probably one of my favorite sections because it addresses like whether you have a disability or neurodivergence, or you know that you're not very good at something but you're better at something else. It's about playing into those strengths and weaknesses to figure out what's going to work best for you. Such as myself, I have compulsive thinking, so I really have to acknowledge that that is both a strength and a weakness. It is good because I can compulsively think of my intention, but it's bad because I can allow intrusive thoughts and I can compulsively think about things that aren't aligned in my life. So that is actually one of my favorite sections. There is considering your dream life. That is really, it's like a questionnaire where you figure out every single aspect of your life, from relationships to where you want to live, to your daily habits, to your hobbies, to your friendships. It goes through a bunch of questions for you to figure out what your dream life would actually be. Then establishing your goals of your journey. Those are like big milestones towards your dream life. So you figured out what your dream life is. What are some big milestones you want to set for that life? Realistically arranging your everyday. That is how your daily routine is going to contribute to heading towards those milestones. So it's just like getting the field of vision smaller and smaller. So what's your dream life? What are these milestones that could look like, years or months, and then your everyday, because they build on top of each other. Mindful exercises to keep you motivated. They were just like some little silly things that I saw that can help you stay motivated, like vision boarding and journaling and reminders. Just like cutesy little things. I'm not going to lie, I was pretty delirious when I wrote this complete guide. I was incredibly sick and incredibly tired, and I think it was the day before launch. So I just kind of like looked up some cute motivational exercises and I like put them in. And then things to consider, that is just like the closing statements for the guide. It is all 18 pages, like 18 letter sized pages. I don't know how well this is going to show on the screen. But yeah, I highly recommend getting it in PDF form and then either printing it or doing like a write-up so that you can interact with it. Because, the one chapter is like completely questions. So it might be easier for you to like, write your questions in. Yeah, this one. They're all questions. So I do highly recommend using it as almost like a worksheet. But you don't have to. You don't even have to read it. Honestly, my blog posts every day are just little blurbs of inspiration or thought or me ranting, honestly. And I do write one for every day, but sometimes I'll post them. Sometimes I post them every 2 days, depending on how my schedule is, but there is a post for every day. And I also make YouTube videos where I will occasionally sit down and casually talk about a topic. And I love doing that. That's very true to my form. I was a YouTuber. I was a vlogger. I loved making YouTube videos. That's very true to me. On my Facebook and my Instagram, I share reels and, photos from other posters. And I also post my own reels and just kind of post updates. My TikTok, that has the most short form content. It also is like the silliest. It's not super potent. If you want the potent stuff, definitely the Instagram and the Facebook of me sharing stuff, or my blog post for the actual my content written down. But the TikTok's for fun, and I do, daily affirmations on that. And the podcast is uploaded weekly every Saturday, usually with a guest. I will have these occasional solo specials, and truly whatever form fits you, or if you're inclined, follow me on all the platforms, from the blog all the way to this pod. Whatever works for you. You do deserve to hear affirmations. You do deserve to be loved and to know that you are worthy of having the life you want. And if you have listened to this whole podcast of me rambling and barely breathing, I appreciate you. I have never done an hour-long straight improv talk, but I hope you enjoyed it. I really appreciate you listening. I appreciate you tuning in. In a world of very short attention spans, if you listen to a small creator's hour-long podcast, you are seriously the kind of person that changes the world. Because when wanting to change the world and wanting to redistribute wealth and redistribute who has the power of influence by being able to commit to consuming content that isn't perfectly curated and sponsored, and it's just real authentic people coming out and being vulnerable and creating, that is huge, because not everyone supports small creators. So by listening to this, you are seriously special. You're changing the world. You're changing my world. And I appreciate you so much for being here. I know that you can accomplish amazing things. And I hope that my journey, my stories, my writings, I hope they do something good for you. Even just the smallest thing. I would love that. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Dani. This is Realistic Intentionality. Thank you.